Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and dear audience. On behalf of Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada, I welcome all of you to today's special webinar titled Hiroshima Resolution and Peace Culture. This particular episode is interesting and very important because possibly in the 21st century, we are standing right in front of a major crisis in Europe, which partly, as my opinion goes, has caused by the war culture that we have in our society. Before I introduce our speaker and the main topics, ladies and gentlemen, let me do the treaty recognition. Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada is located on original lands of Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Dear audience, as we promised, we have invited one of the finest speakers and peace advocate from the States, and he's from peakinstitute.org. Mr. Steve Leper, who I'm going to introduce briefly to you and reading out his bio. And he spent half of his 74 years in Japan. And he has a master's degree in clinical psychology and has worked as a family counselor, management consultant, translator, and peace activist. He himself says that he's still continuing as a peace activist. He believes until he encounters facts to the contrary that he has translated, edited, or interpreted more bomb survivor stories than anyone in the world except his wife. He began working for Mayors for Peace in 2002, which led to his appointment in 2007 as chairman of the Hiroshima Peace Culture Foundation. He stepped down in 2013 and currently is a visiting professor at Hiroshima Jogakuin University and Nagasaki University. He is co-founder of Peace Culture Village in Hiroshima and Peak Institute in Montclair, New Jersey, Detroit, Michigan, and Atlanta, Georgia. His publications include Hiroshima Resolution, which is bilingual, Nihon ga Sekai o Suku, Japanese, Hiroshima o Sutasatai, America Jin, and Kakujeki Haijetsu e no Michi, Japanese, and Peace Culture and Divine Natural Path. I beg apology if I have mispronounced Japanese terminologies. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Steve Leper. Welcome, sir, to the studio.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And you did very well with that Japanese. I'm sorry, I should have cut those out of there. They are not meant for an English-speaking audience.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, next we have our own David G. Newman. He is a Rotarian and peace builder, very active and advocate of peace. And also he is our advisor of Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada. David, welcome to the studio, also to you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let me talk very briefly about Steve Leper's work, and which is fascinating, and I want we all should know a little bit before I hand over the studio for his speech. So the website that we are going to briefly share with you in the scroll, you will find it is written, and it started with Martin Luther King's fascinating word, and I quote here: "Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that," unquote. It's such a fascinating way to start and introduce the main ideologies and theme of Peak Institute. And also, I would like to share very briefly what Peak Institute and Steve Leper's organization believe in, as they very eloquently and succinctly wrote in their website, is justice is love in action. And if I just quote some of the words there, we will push through this together as one body and soul for peace, for justice, for our community. Do not toe the line, do not mute yourself. Silence is acquiescence and passive acceptance of bigotry, and state-sanctioned brutality is death. We walk hand in hand on this journey together. Know that we are not alone. We will overcome. Scream at the top of our lungs if we must, but always continue to wake up and ensure that others hear us. We must band together with one voice, one soul, and one fight. We are creating a path to unity, of community, and peace, unquote. Such a beautiful way of explaining peace activism. As I promised, ladies and gentlemen, and dear audience, let me welcome Steve Leper to our discussion now. Steve, the studio is yours, and please go ahead, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for reading from our mission. That reminds me, I had a whole nother way of starting, but that reminds me how I really should start. And that is that I have come more and more to believe what Gandhi told us, and that is that we have to be the change we want to see in the world. We have to manifest this in ourselves and among ourselves. And by ourselves, I am referring to peace culture people, people who are promoting peace culture. And the peace culture is different from the war culture in many, many ways. But for me, the three most important are how it deals with conflict, how it deals with competition, and how it deals with violence. And for me, when I look at the war culture, especially when I was working in the corporate world, both in Japan and in America, within the corporate world, conflict is usually seen as a chance to win or lose, a chance to go up in the hierarchy or down in the hierarchy. And it brings out the competitive juices in people, and people want to win a conflict. That's the war culture approach to it. Then the peace culture approach to conflict is that we see conflict as a problem to be solved. It's a problem for the larger entity within which that conflict arose. It could be a family, it could be a department, it could be a corporation, it could be a country, it could be a planet. But wherever it is emerging, we have to solve that problem. And solving the problem means not solving it for one subgroup at the cost or the expense of some other subgroup. We solve the problem by finding a solution that everyone agrees, well, at least everyone accepts, and everyone accepts is the best we can do for the moment, at least. So we are trying to resolve the conflict, right? Then the other issue is the competition. Who are you competing for? In the war culture, you are competing for yourself. And then who do you include in yourself? It could be your family, it could be your team, it could be your company, or it could be your political party. It's rare even to have someone competing for a country, although that does happen now and then. But it's literally impossible to compete for the benefit of humanity as a whole or for the earth. That the competitive principle requires a rival. It requires a competitor. So that is a fundamental principle of the war culture. In the peace culture, obviously, we are not doing that. We are not trying to win for a subgroup. We are trying to find out how all of humanity can be healthy and happy. How can we keep the planet livable? How can we keep this ecosystem sustaining us all? And that means we have to all work together on this issue, or on all our issues, really. Then the other big problem, the biggest problem of all, is violence. In the war culture, which, let's say, just to make it extreme, you are joining the army, The first thing you are taught in the army is to obey your superiors. That's the first thing. You look up the chain and you obey that way, and you go down the chain and you demand obedience that way. That is a key principle. The other principle is you kill before you are killed. You are learning there to kill before you are killed. In the peace culture, and this has been said by Gandhi and Martin Luther King and Dorothy Day, everybody, all of our sages and most of our religious leaders, the original ones, most of them are telling us it's better to die than kill. You only lie, cheat, steal, torture, and kill when you are dealing with an enemy. And Gandhi made it very clear that he had no enemies. The British were not his enemy. They were friends who needed a little help. They were friends who needed to be converted to the idea of India's independence. So, in other words, you do not lie, cheat, steal, torture, kill, do evil things to win against an enemy. That is not peace culture. That if you are accepting violence for any reason whatsoever, that is not, by definition, that is not peace culture. About peace culture, I encountered peace culture first in Hiroshima. I had prepared for it a bit. I was a family therapist. No, first, I was a conscientious objector to avoid going to Vietnam. I worked in the Wisconsin Children's Treatment Center for 4 years, and there I studied family therapy. Family therapy is basically bringing the whole family into the room and trying to resolve the conflicts that they bring to you. Then I was pirated from that to work for a company that did what our boss said was conflict resolution consulting in a corporate atmosphere, or a corporate, within a corporation. So anyway, we would go in there, and our boss would say that they will ask you for a performance evaluation system, a performance evaluation system. They will ask you for various systems. You do not give them anything until you have resolved the conflict that got them to ask you to go in there. If you give them any kind of tool before you resolve the conflict, they will not use it, or they will use it wrongly, poorly. They will use it to attack each other. Then you will make no progress. The first thing you have to do is find out why you were called in there, and then help them resolve that conflict. And then any tool you give them, they will make work. And I found I worked there for 4 years, and I found over and over again that is exactly what happens. That if you go in, well, what we would do is we'd go in, we would talk to all of the main players, which is usually the partners and the secretaries. My boss was very clear. You start with the secretaries. They know what's happening. They know who hates who is on whose side, and how long this has been going on. And you start there. Then you go up the chain and you get to the partners. And it usually will be something about how the person who founded this company recently died or retired, and now some partners are jockeying for position, and some of them want to grow the firm, some of them want to keep it the way it is. Those kind of things. That's very, very common way of, or the very common conflicts that are taking place in the corporation. So we go in, we interview everybody, we find out who's on which side. Then we take them all off for a 3 or 4 day retreat into some national park or the mountains somewhere. We take them and we have them talk. And we list up on the flip chart, here are the problems that we perceived within your system. And we will be glad to help you with your performance appraisal. But first, we need you to fix these conflicts. Let's resolve these conflicts. And then we would do that. And I'm going on and on about this because I think the most important thing we did in those sessions was appoint someone as the conflict resolution manager for that company. Within the corporation, having nothing to do with the chain of command, having nothing to do with a way of getting a promotion or a demotion, we pick somebody who is going to be the point person for conflicts. So if you have a conflict with somebody in this organization, you take it to Sandy, let's say. Sandy was one of my favorites. So you take it to Sandy. When Sandy gets a conflict, she might do a process herself and try to get the people who are angry at each other to work on it together. Or if she feels it's beyond her pay grade, then she calls me. And if she thinks it's beyond my pay grade, she calls my boss. And we go in there and we try to help them work on this, on the conflict. But having someone in the organization who is responsible for conflict, we found was extremely important to the good operation of that organization. We also gradually develop in the organization, we develop a commitment to resolving the conflict. That's the other main key point. In other words, we got to get them over the urge to win. We have to convince them that winning is not in the best interest of the company. The best interest of the company is to resolve the conflict, not to win. If you are in it to win, you are hurting the company. That is what we are teaching within the company. And whenever the company got to the point where it would accept that, then things went amazingly well. And there was one company that was especially just wonderful along these lines. It was a company made of 7 guys who went to high school together. They were architects and engineers. When they graduated from college, they said, we are going to work together and we are going to create a company together. And we are going to stay together and do this whole thing together. And they were already devoted to conflict resolution. And that's why they invited us to come in and help them with some of these minor conflicts that would come up. But that company, the corporation itself was full of love. You could feel it when you walk in the door. It is not an angry place. It is a warm, welcoming, smiling, loving place. And the people in there didn't leave. Almost never did anyone ever want to leave there. And a very, very low turnover is my point. And the people would not be afraid to raise issues. When the partners were arguing, secretaries would call them on it. They would have the courage to do that. And when they had the courage to do that, that made the whole system churn along. And everyone grew from this. The partners grew. The company grew. It was an extremely successful, happy company. And that company is one I keep in my mind as what we are aiming for. That was a peace culture company. And we are trying to create a peace culture planet here. And what we need to do is to get people aware of conflict and aware of the need to resolve this conflict. And it looks to me like I've already talked more than the agreed upon 15 minutes, but I would like to say one more thing. Can I have like 2 or 3 more minutes? Because the point I want to make is that we live in a pursuit of power paradigm. The whole society that we live in depends on first, obtain the power. Then once you have attained the power, you do something good with it. Right? That's the point. But first, you have to have the money, you have to have the rank, you have to have the votes. If you get those things, which are the power to do things, then you can inflict your solution onto everybody else. So we are going for 51 votes out of 100, or we are going for enough money to buy everyone around you. and to buy the politicians or to buy the companies that you want them to do your bidding. So you have to have the power. Once you have the power, you inflict your solution. And I believe that we have to change that paradigm. We have to switch from the pursuit of power paradigm to a pursuit or to a problem-solving paradigm. In other words, we don't try to win. We try to resolve the conflicts. Okay, that I think I've already talked longer than I was supposed to talk, but anyway, let's start there and see where we go.
Thank you very much, Steve, for, I would say, a brilliant overview of the peace culture and what is meant through your work. And we are indeed very grateful for the opening, and setting the context for today's discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, as I promised earlier, let me bring David G. Newman to the discussion. He is a Rotarian and peace builder and an advisor to Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada. David, may I request you to kindly engage Mr. Steve to the discussion based on the two major themes that we are discussing today. Floor is yours, sir.
So you began with a real life experience that you had in the conflict culture within corporate America. And then you got exposed to many different approaches to identifying, as I understand your writing, identifying the obstacles, and pursuit of power is one of those huge obstacles to accomplishing a culture of peace. Let's just move from your office experience into your mediator experience in dealing with the existential threat and risk of nuclear weapons and climate change, and look at our democratic system, which we can see being challenged recently in Canada. It has challenged the United States. And you have created a new adjective to accompany a political party, and you call it a resolutionary party. I'd like you to have to explain what this is, and secondly, how you think that this might overcome an obstacle to effective democracy that is an impediment to a culture of peace in our communities and in our states and provinces and nations and globally. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that exactly perfect question. I'm grateful for that. Let's see where to begin with that. I guess the idea of resolutionary, I didn't actually make that up. I forgot the name of the guy, but another guy has written about the idea of resolutionary, and that is, or resolution. I invented resolutionary, but he invented resolutionism. Resolutionism is the determination to resolve conflict rather than to fight about it. And I think that we need to have a political party that is devoted to doing that. So that, for example, let's say that you and Causer and I are candidates for the Resolutionary Party. We do not have a platform. We do not promise to do anything except to provide or to call all of the stakeholders to the table and have them decide what to do about X or Y, so that the process is the government, or the government. I call it government as process rather than government as power or government as policy. Government as process. So the elected officials should not be the deciders, as George W. Bush claimed that he was. I'm the decider, he said. No, elected officials should not be deciders. They should be organizers of processes through which the stakeholders make the decisions and come up with the best that we can do at the time in the pursuit of truth and the greatest good for the greatest number. That is the pursuit, not to win. And right now, everyone is concentrating on winning. And Kauser made mention of the Ukraine situation. This is a very clear situation in which various people are trying to win something there. They are trying to get things to happen the way they want them to happen. They are not trying to come up with a solution that is good for everyone. If they were doing that, they would not be killing people and rubblizing their houses. So what we need is a government that is devoted to coming to resolution. I know that you, David, know very well that mediation is a body of knowledge that has been with us at least since the early 80s. I went to the first national conflict resolution conference in Georgia, it turns, the University of Georgia. Dean Rusk held this conference. And it was the first time that all of these people from around the country got together to talk about conflict resolution. After that, we got mediation centers growing up in lots of places, but here in Atlanta, we have a good mediation center. Alternatives to litigation we have going on. There's a lot, restorative justice. These things are happening. But the problem with that is people with power don't choose mediation. If they think they're going to win, they try to win. They don't go to mediation if they think they're going to win. Some do, I admit. Some people have very good hearts and they know that it's better to do restorative justice, or it's better not to defeat your spouse in the case of a divorce or something like that. But for the most part, really powerful people got that way by being competitive. Competitive people don't like to go to mediation and have to let the weak people tell them what to do. So they want to win. That is the problem. And we have to overcome that by putting the government, the budget, the timing, the government projects, all of these things have to be in the hands of people who don't give it out until we all agree on something. And those mediators cannot be either helped or harmed by any of the decisions that government makes. In other words, if I am the mayor of Atlanta, I can get a salary as a mayor of Atlanta, but I have to I even have to show my bank book so that people will know I am not getting any money other than my salary. From nowhere am I getting any money other than my salary. And another very important thing is that all the meetings have to be on screen, available for people to see. People could be invited, or it could be streamed. We now have the technology to let the whole state of Georgia watch what happens in the State House in Atlanta. We can do that. And we need to do that because one of the key issues is recovering trust. The government has lost trust, and we need to get the trust by not having people in there who are just pursuing power in some other form, and B, by making it very, very obvious what all of the players are saying and doing and why they are saying and doing these things. Then we can come to truth. If we are being secretive, we'll never get to the truth. So we have to if we can't get to the truth, then we can't get to a good solution. So for the truth, we have to be transparent. And then to keep power out of politics, we have to have a mediators guild, that these mediators do not go up and they do not go down. We get a certain amount of money no matter what happens, and no more and no less. Then we are free to help everybody resolve the conflicts to the best of our ability. So I guess that's a basic concept that I'm trying to push here.
I'm over to Kauser because you've really explained very effectively and in ways that show your emotional commitment to necessary change in the arenas where decisions are made in the public interest.
Yeah.
And if you do it in partisan, limited party interests, then you're cheating the public of the best that people in political parties have to offer them, whoever they are, whether they voted for them or not, the public interest. Kauser, over to you.
Thank you, David. Steve, it's a fascinating discussion. I would like to kind of steer you a little bit towards your book, Hiroshima Resolution, that you have written, and you have talked about two elements and two commitments, actually: pursuit of sustainable universal well-being and nonviolent resolution of conflict. However, the discussion that David and you had, I think, is brilliant in terms of our power culture and the paradigm shift towards the understanding of power and use of power to resolve conflict. So I do have a question, a follow-up question, but as I said, if you kindly speak a bit about your book for our audience, that will be greatly appreciated. Steve.
Okay. Give me a direction. Which part of that book do you want me to get into? Because I'll talk for 3 hours about this book.
Absolutely. My apology. So I would be requesting you to kindly focus on the nonviolent resolution of conflict, and what have you experienced when you wrote this book? And I think it was grounded very much in the culture of peace as you experienced in Japan and in America. Thank you.
Yeah. One of the things, thank you for that question and for that direction, because that takes me back to Japan. And I have to say that even though I studied family therapy and conflict resolution in America, I had no idea what I was talking about until I spent a long time in Japan and watched it by being a member of a Japanese company for 12 years and by being on the board of 2 or 3 different Japanese NGOs or MPOs, nonprofit organizations. And I have watched Japanese people talk hour after hour after hour, trying to resolve conflict. And I have seen this happen in the corporate world and in the MPO world. In America, it happens much more in the MPO world. And I can tell you that as a person who spent more than 12 years consulting between Americans and Japanese within a company, I can tell you that one of the main obstacles between Japanese and Americans when they try to work together is that Americans cannot talk that long. They cannot handle it. And they halfway through, they say, let's vote. Come on, let's vote. I'm not into this. This is a waste of time, et cetera, et cetera. And then they go home so that the decisions are made by the Japanese who stay until 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or midnight or however long it takes. And I keep saying to the Americans, they complain, right? They complain. The Japanese are making all the decisions. If you want to be part of that decision, you have to stay up as long as they do. And it was extremely difficult for them. And I know, and especially here in Atlanta, I knew one guy who was absolutely determined to do that. He ended up being the president of the American affiliated company here. He made it in that corporate hierarchy by being at the decision-making moments. Anyway, this is a really different attitude toward resolving conflict versus voting. And this is what we don't do in America. hardly at all. That we are quick to vote, and we are quick to decide that a meeting is a waste of time. Okay, President so-and-so, you make the decision. We'll do what you want us to do. Just tell us what to do. We say those kind of things. But we don't really take the conflict to the point where we have a breakthrough. And I can tell you from both family therapy and corporate therapy that there is a process. First is retribalization, then is polarization, then is depression, then is breakthrough. If you do not get to breakthrough, you have not solved the problem. So, and mostly Americans don't get to breakthrough. They will vote before they get, in fact, they vote before they even get depressed. So it's not even the same sort of approach. Then another very important thing that I learned in Hiroshima is that you have to control your emotions. And the Japanese are great at that. The Japanese control their emotions. Americans like to just crash into each other and see where the spark, or where the pieces fall. Where the Japanese are extremely careful. And I remember one African guy who came to Japan, and after he was there for a little while, I said, well, I had lunch with him and I asked him how he's doing. He says, "Oh, I hate the Japanese." And I said, "Why?" They're so dishonest. And I said, "Dishonest?" Because that was not my experience of them at all. And he said, "Yeah, you ask them a question and they'll think about the answer." And that is dishonesty in his culture. If you have to think about the answer, you are being dishonest. Whereas in Japan, if you don't think about the answer, you are not trying to synthesize all of the conflicts that you are dealing with. It's a really different culture with respect to the resolution of conflict. But of course, the main thing is to be completely committed to doing it non-violently, meaning you don't hurt the people verbally or physically. You're not trying to hurt them. You're trying to find a solution. And that is a commitment that takes time in a family. It takes time in a company. And we are nowhere near doing that as humanity, at least from what I can see. So we need the Resolutionary Party people to come in and teach everybody that.
Thank you so much, Steve. It's a fascinating discussion. I hope we have had an even longer discussion tonight. But nonetheless, let me hand over the studio to David now for his next question. And I'll possibly come again with one of my queries today about Hibakusha appeal. So let's go to David now and we'll take it from there. David, floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, just to throw in a word that you haven't used. You're very cautious at the beginning in not using the word getting to an agreement. An agreement wasn't the word, but you said what I would describe as a generally acceptable result, generally acceptable outcome.
Yeah.
Would that be in North American language? Would that be getting to consensus, getting to a consensus?
Yes, or in that Roger Fisher's way of thinking, it's getting to yes.
Yeah.
Right? It's getting to yes. And sometimes people say yes just to get it over with for right now. Right? It's like, okay, I'll go along with this for right now. Sometimes that's the best you can do at the moment. But if you are there and you haven't really gotten to the breakthrough, then you will be back again to see those people another time. But if in the American non-profit organization world that I have observed, a lot of times, well, many companies, not companies, many groups, organizations are sincerely trying for consensus. They really are. And within that, a lot of people say, okay, I don't really agree with this, but I'm going to step aside. meaning I'm going to take myself out of the conflict right now and let you go ahead and do this, and I'll watch how things go. And sometimes that is the best that we can do at a certain moment. That happens a lot more in America than it does in Japan, or nobody is overt about it in Japan. They may be doing it, but they don't say that they're doing it, right? They just do it. But people do step aside, and every now and then the president or the king of whatever organization this is that we're dealing with will step in and say, we're out of time, let's do this. And then people will fall in line. That is also a fact that happens in Japan.
What about the role of what would encompass mediative functions, and that would be the role of a facilitator in Japan? In these kinds of, in a business environment, presumably there's not a facilitator. It is that everyone knows the process. Do they not need a neutral, a facilitator that has no stake in the game, stake in the issues, or not?
On the boards and in the corporate groups that I have dealt with, these people have been working together for 10, 15, 30 years. They know each other really well. That's another thing about Japan. They're not flitting around here and there the way that Americans do. You know, Americans, if they've worked somewhere for 5 years, that's too long from their point of view. I should go to this organization so I can get a higher salary and a higher rank or something like that. That, at least in my generation in Japan, that did not happen. It's happening more now. But the long term, for example, when I was in the Peace Culture Foundation, and I was the only non-Japanese person in the whole system, and those people have been working together for 20, 30 years, they make decisions by telepathy. I have no idea what they are saying. And the only way I could inflict myself on them is to cry and hold my breath and things like that. Then I sometimes got what I wanted, but they are very good at knowing. In Japan, they say, he says 1, I understand 10. Okay, so he says one thing, I understand 10 things. And that is the way they want to be. However, if I am introducing you to your wife, I am your facilitator. I am your mediator, and I will be involved until the knot is tied and until you are perfectly happy. Not only that, but if you decide you want to send her home, I will come in there and try and fix things. And that is also true in the corporate world. If you are doing business with somebody in the corporate world, most of the time, you will know who introduced you to that guy, to that customer, or to that source. So then let's say that I introduced you to someone who is going to buy your product. Okay. So I am saying that you are selling a good product and this guy is a good customer and you should work this out. And I am taking responsibility for that. I am your mediator, your facilitator, and I take responsibility for you both being good guys. And that is one of the reasons that Japanese society is so peaceful, is because they have mediators like that everywhere, all through the business world. They are people, they say it's not, we say it's not what you know, it's who you know. Well, it's over there, it is who you know plus who they introduce you to. And these introductions are no joke. If you introduce somebody to somebody else and that goes bad, and one of them, you introduce some horrible person to your friend will be plenty pissed off at you for doing that. Really. I have had that problem a couple of times when I was too quick to introduce somebody to somebody.
Thank you so much, Steve, for again brilliant explanation. So, as I kind of alluded a little earlier, I would like you to kindly comment on the Hibakusha appeal and why it is relevant now. It is there in the website, I understand, but for our greater audience, if you kindly speak a bit about the idea. Thank you.
Well, the original idea was a campaign that was going to go from 2016 to 2020. And that campaign did go, and they raised almost 20 million signatures on that. I personally consider that a failure. 20 million signatures is not enough to get the attention of the people who need to attend to this. And I was always pushing on various groups to cooperate more. And this is where we have to be the change we want to see in the world, what Gandhi said, that peace groups do not cooperate for the most part. Very often, well, okay, when I became the chairman of the Peace Culture Foundation, there were over 300 peace groups in Hiroshima. And they're all like 10 people or 20 people. So I tried to organize them all into some one campaign. I tried to do that. I ended up getting about 10 of them into one campaign. All the rest of them, they were interested in saying what they're doing. They're not interested in listening to anyone else or coming up with a joint activity. And to be fair to them, they're busy. They're working real hard to raise the funds and do what is necessary to do what they're trying to do. And, they don't know that this new campaign that Steve is trying to organize is going to go anywhere. So they don't do it. But to me, this is the problem that we face. We want America, Russia, and China to cooperate to save the planet. And we can't cooperate enough to convince the world that this should happen. And by we, I'm talking about the thousands, tens of thousands of small organizations and the millions of people who are trying to achieve a healthy planet, universal health and well-being, right? Lots of people are working on this, but we are all working in our little silos and with our own little friends, and we come up with fabulous campaigns that 100 people find out about. Even at the UN, we have all these people who are really doing great work in and around the UN, and no one hears about it. And I can go into Hiroshima right now. I can go to Hiroshima. I can stop 10 people on the street, and 8 of them will never have heard of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. This is Hiroshima that we're talking about. If I go to Tokyo, it'll be 9 out of 10, or maybe even 9.5 out of 10. They will not know, they will not have heard of the TPNW, right? And this is Japan, where if I go to New York and I say, well, actually, right around the UN, there'll be a lot of people who heard. But if I go to New Jersey and ask people, well, hey, what do you think of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons? They will either not know or they will be down on it. They won't like it. We are not getting the message across. And I believe that that's because we are not spending enough money, and that's because we're not cooperating enough. The landmine ban in the late 1990s, the campaign for abolishing landmines went outside the UN and began campaigning, and they quickly got about 550 or 590 NGO partners. They had countries, they had who are participating. For the last 4 years, they were spending $2 to $3 million a year having Princess Diana on TV every night with some kid with a lost arm and a lost leg, and they're talking about how bad landmines are. This is how you raise consciousness. And we are not doing that. Nuclear weapons would be the easiest thing in the world to scare people about, right? To make people angry and to make people never vote for anyone who's in favor of nuclear weapons. They are an enemy of humanity. They're trying to get me killed. We should not be listening to those people. And that is an easy case to make. Not only that, nuclear weapons is the easiest global problem we face. 9 countries could solve this problem in a week or 2 if they put their minds to it. And we have to make them put their minds to it. And at this point, barring the sudden emergence of the Revolutionary Party, we have to do it with a massive PR media campaign that actually gets human consciousness raised on this issue. The human consciousness was raised on the issue of landmines by Princess Diana. We need that level of work to be done on nuclear weapons, and we are not doing it because we are fighting among ourselves. Even the people who are anti-nuclear are fighting amongst themselves. They do not cooperate. They do not raise the millions of dollars necessary. They hate the idea of hiring professional help, and they are doing, they're saying, let 100 flowers bloom, right? They're saying, well, 100 flowers are blooming and no one is seeing any of them, is my complaint.
Thank you so much, Steve, for once again, a very brilliant an explanation of the culture that we have in general at the macro level. Ladies and gentlemen, we are just at the end of our session, and at this point in time, let me welcome David Newman to have his last words about the theme and Steve's work, which he follows very closely. And then I will invite our speaker, Mr. Steve, to have his last words based on the discussion, what he has spoken with us today, and especially his hopes and fears for the future. David, floor is yours. Back to you again. Thank you.
Yeah, Steve, really appreciate your wisdom, which is based on such a rich, multicultural experience, and it gives it a depth and a broader perspective than so many of us in North America. I wanted to just comment that the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, of course, supported by ICANN, and ICANN is building that kind of collaboration through partners and so forth. And I'm a Rotarian. I think you're a Rotarian too, aren't you, Steve?
Yes,
Steve's
I am.
a Rotarian. Kauser
Yes.
is a Rotarian too. So all of us are involved in that service above self, local to global network movement. And we're trying to motivate the people that are on the boards of Rotary International, the foundation, the operative board, and the districts around the world, the 530 plus Rotary districts representing really our entire planet, to rise up to a level of consciousness that can result in an evolutionary paradigm shift to address this threat and risk to life on our planet. Steve has been a strong supporter of this happening. Kauser is. We've had occasions to have this spoken to. And what you've done is given, I think, more motivation, Steve, with your presentation. And we can now share this video on this, in this library of materials with the world. So the audience can be broad and it can be utilized very effectively. So express gratitude on behalf of CRIC and on behalf of Rotary and fellow Rotarians and really the global human family for your contribution in words, written and oral tonight, written in your books, in oral tonight. And I turn it over to you for the last word to leave a lasting impression. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And Kauser was mentioning hopes and fears, and you have mentioned the hope. First of all, I love ICANN. I love what they have done. The creation of the TPNW was a fabulous step in the right direction. Right now, though, I think they are making a mistake to focus so heavily on governments and diplomats. That's not where the problem lies. The problem is human consciousness. It's the peace culture versus the war culture at the grassroots level. That's where the problem lies. So I want them to do that. But if we were to move in that direction at all, Rotary could be such a huge part of that. Rotary is basically everywhere. And in Hiroshima was a part of creating Mayors for Peace. I don't know if you've heard about that, but that was the NGO that is the negotiating and campaigning arm of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And we now have over 8,000 cities in 165 countries, right? Well, I learned from that mayors don't do anything. Mayors don't do anything unless someone in their city makes them do it. So what we need is Rotarians making their mayors do things. So we need a plan that Rotarians can get into and sell to their mayors, and then their mayors move. You know, if we had $1,000 from each of those mayors, we would have $8 million. We could run a good campaign for $8 million. But we don't have that because we don't have a plan. We really need to get together and do this huge plan. And I think Rotary has a fabulous opportunity to save the world. You know, they say, we connect the world. That's the slogan, right? The Rotarian slogan, we connect the world. We need to do that. We need to be connecting the world and then getting the world to go to their mayors and demand action on this anti-nuclear front and be not accepting this danger that we live with all the time. And if we could get some movement on nuclear weapons, that would be the human race saying, we want to cooperate to survive. If we said that, it would open the door to cooperating to survive in so many other areas. But right now, how can we cooperate if we're threatening to blow each other off the face of the earth at any moment? We are threatening like that. We have to stop that. That's the number one priority, I think. And Rotary, ICANN, Mayors for Peace, YMCA, YWCA, these are groups that want to do something. We need to figure out a way to get these groups doing it. And I still have a hope. You know, it looks like we're going in the wrong direction, you know, with the whole Ukraine thing and all. And it looks like we're on the verge of a nuclear war. I just don't think so. I think we may be on the verge of saying enough is enough. We need to make some changes here. We are in desperate straits. Let's save the planet and ourselves. And Rotary could be a big part of that.
Thank you so much, Steve. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the, I would say, typically the concluding remarks from our side. Once again, let me start by thanking and expressing our gratitude to Mr. Steve Lepper to be with us, and Mr. David G. Newman for their wonderful contribution to, I would say, a very enlightened discussion today about peace culture and what we should be worried about in 2022 and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, also I would like to state that we have heard Steve Lepper's discussion for the past 1 hour or so, and he kind of touched upon very interesting ideas. For example, the power culture and the paradigm idea and shift in our understanding of attitude towards competition and resolving conflict within the workplace and beyond. Later on, we also discussed about the existential threat of nuclear weapons. And on this point, let me also reiterate that one thing as humanity, what we face with regards to our existential threat is nuclear weapon. There is no controversy, there is no confusion about that statement. And we have heard how various organizations are working towards abolishing the nuclear threat in the world. And also we have discussed about Rotary's contribution. And as a Rotarian myself, David G. Newman, as my mentor here, we are very proud to be a member of this group, and we always would like to contribute to the world peace as it comes. In conclusion, let me also touch upon a bit of Gandhiji's principle, and Mr. Steve mentioned a number of times about Gandhiji's teaching of ahimsa, especially. So many of you are aware of Gandhiji's work, his theories, and most importantly, his practices. Let me quote a bit of his idea about nonviolence, which we spoke quite a bit in this evening. And according to Gandhiji's idea that nonviolence is an active force, it's not passive, it's an active force of the highest order. It is a soul force of, or the power of Godhead within us. Imperfect man cannot grasp the whole of that essence. He would not be able to bear its full place, but even an infinitesimal fraction of it, when it becomes active within us, can work wonders. I think given the situation unfolding in Ukraine and what we are seeing globally, I think these words would resonate in the near future. And we all can join our hands together, as Mr. Steve rightly mentioned, that we should work and coordinate and together for the world peace. And only then we might see in our lifetime a world which is more peaceful than ever. With these words, let me conclude the session. Thank you so much for being with us for last 1 hour. Stay well, stay safe, and let's join our hands together to end war globally. Goodbye and good night, Miigwech.
Good night.